and wait for us to pop up from behind the blue wall.
I was gonna take a shower, but then I took a nap. Though I did set my alarm so that I was up on time this time. I didn't just sleep through the podcast.
I appreciate that. I will say that you said that immediately as we went live, so you know.
Well, fuck. Well, you know, listen. If anybody wants to know why my hair looks a little ratty,
yeah, we're still
that's
behind.
why.
We're still well. They can't see you yet, but now they can.
True.
Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host Mango,
and I am your co-host Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about the Secrets of Azeroth event and how it relates to kind of like ARG type stuff in games, like non-super well signposted stuff. But before we do that, pretty much for the folks who don't know what it is we do on this podcast.
On this podcast, we like to talk about games, and a tried and true game that we have been playing for, you know what is also nutty? The amount of time that we have been playing World of Warcraft.
Yes.
Together. Yeah. World of Warcraft is interesting. I'm very off WoW right now. As I've mentioned in recent times. But I did finally sort of log back in for like more than an hour for this event, for the Secrets of Azeroth event, which I think is really interesting. And I guess that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So just for context, I'm going to pitch this episode mostly because I found myself really enjoying. Let's give 3 bits of context. There are 3 parts to this event. There's the core in-game Secrets of Azeroth. There is community posts that lead to piles outside, which plays much more like an ARG. And there's a second ARG community level thing, which is about finding clues to like do a bunch of stuff with a group to then go get a mount. I've done all the Secrets of Azeroth. I've done the amount of community notes things to get the pet, and I have not done the group thing yet. But I did do the relevant event in game to get the feat of strength that was associated with it, which was in Valdrakken. And I found myself really enjoying the Secrets of Azeroth. But like not as much enjoying the other 2 aspects. The community one in particular, since I actually did that. I think it can kind of be boiled down into a couple of things. One of which is that like the Secrets of Azeroth core bit was in the game itself, and it doesn't play out like traditional World of Warcraft quests for the most part. They hand you like an item with a description, and you have to go find it without like a quest marker. Which I found super compelling and found like fun to do on my own time. However, I did not as soon as I heard that you had to go like hunt down social media posts, I was like, I'm just gonna look it up on Wowhead, and did that for the community level stuff. I had a similar gut reaction to the it's called Mimron Jump Jet stuff, but I haven't done that yet just because I had to go find a group, and that's the second level here, right? Like there was one community post that required finding people to do, and I hated it. And I basically ended up LFGing it and making that work. Just it was 2 other people rather. But I was kind of puzzling over my reaction to that, what I thought made successful versions of all these things. And Buddy, I'm going to give you a chance to speak on this. How much have you done, and how have you felt about all of it?
Okay, so I've done maybe the first 12. I thought. I saw that there was a feat of strength associated with it. I was like, well, I want that, right? So I logged in and I started doing all of them in order. And then I was seeing this stuff because it's all based in Valdrakken, right? And I was seeing this stuff in Valdrakken, and then I watched a bunch of people get the feat of strength because I was just in Valdrakken when they got it, and I was like, oh, I understand. The feat of strength isn't to do all of these secrets; it is just to do this one version of this like one event before like the thing is over. So then I just swapped. I did that. My intention is to finish the Secrets of Azeroth sort of quest chain because even though I was following like the Wowhead stuff pretty directly, I was having a good time with it, to be honest. Mostly just on the level of like reading the quest text and like, I don't know, following this cute sort of minor story being like unveiled or whatever. You have these preservationists, who are sort of a minor faction throughout Dragonflight, and they're trying to track down these like important pieces of like lore, almost like as like a quest chain. That was just like fun and interesting and engaging, right? There's a lot of stuff about like, oh, you're gonna go to one of the contacts and it's a woman with, it's a goblin at the barbershop who specializes in tinfoil hats, but the tinfoil hats are thinking it's like that kind of stuff. Was fun and engaging. And then I also did like the toys, right? They had these toys that you had access to, and the toys gave you different ways to engage with the world in order to solve these quests, which I thought was very fun. I didn't end up doing anything with the community outside of the stuff surrounding this feat of strength. Though I do vaguely know of the community notes and Mimron's jump jets and all that stuff.
Yeah. So just call it in the chat. Lou says this event made me want to be a preservationist. I need an RP character who does this now. That makes sense. Oh, Lou says she made you a jump jet thing, which is
That's true. I did do one of the jump jet things just because I was in voice with people and they needed a body, and so I just showed up and I did it for that. So that is true.
Yeah. No, I mean I need to do them all just because like I said, it requires a group. But it's so I agree with you. The preservation storyline is cool, but I don't know. This is like a thing that gets talked about with modern games, right? Is like, how much hand holding do you need for a player and how much is appropriate, how much is frustrating, right? Like famously, like Dark Souls doesn't really tell you anything about anything, and you just kind of have to go find it. This was really kind of most prominent in Elden Ring because you had like a wide area to explore and you got suggestions of things, but not a lot of direction, with like one or two examples of like some very, very occasionally somebody would mark something on your map, and only if it was like really hidden somewhere. But most of the time it's just like, I'll be, like find me, like some mystery and you have to go figure out what the answer to that riddle is or look it up online. And similarly here, most things in World of Warcraft are like you hit a button and it's like fly to this point and collect 7 foozles and deliver it to the quest giver. This one was like, here's the quest. Here's a note that says like like the first one, to avoid major spoilers, is like, this spear belongs to somebody in Northrend, right? And so I flew out there. I talked to one of the to a Tuskar in Northrend. I talked to a Tuskar. It's like, you need to talk to this Tuskar. And so I talked to that Tuskar, and she was like, there's a statue to this guy over there, and here's a screenshot of the statue, essentially, right? And I thought that was very cool. The only thing I looked up there was like, where is like they named an area, and I was not familiar enough with the map, and I didn't feel like pixel hunting to get like, it wasn't one of the names on the map. It was like, I looked up approximately the area that was in, and I did that all manually because it wasn't super long. And I could find it, and basically they all play out like this, right? Sometimes they have a little bit more help. You get like a toy that gives you a coordinate system that like is like, if you set your coordinate system here and you go like 5-4, you will find a thing. And similar kind of revealed toys, which I found entertaining, and that all kind of like resonated with me and felt fun to play with. I wonder how much of this too is like, I felt like it was fun, but it was also like not like it's not like if I couldn't figure it out, one, I couldn't go look it up, and two, it was like a thing I needed to be ready for raid, right? Like, it's a mount and a hat.
Yeah, so I think in general, I like the approach. There's 2 pieces of it that I thought was good. One is I like the approach that you build half of the event around just solo stuff, right? Something you can do on your own, puzzles that you can solve on your own that are reasonably like difficult, but like also it is not built to be, like a deep crazy mystery to go through, right? It's just, oh, hey, here's the thing. You're going to get pointed in the right direction. Here's what it's like to be pointed in the right direction. Here's some stuff to help you figure it out. But I think, and like any reasonable person, like outside of maybe like little kids, I would probably expect could do this series of quests without too much trouble, right? And even if they do have trouble, they can go to Wowhead. I was doing them pretty effortlessly. Again, I was doing them with Wowhead like open. And generally anything that required me to use the toys, I was just kind of doing. I don't know. I was just kind of doing them by hand because it's not like I'm going to sit there and like micromanage it or whatever. But literally anytime I ever really got stuck, I just went and I looked it up on Wowhead on my other screen because like I thought I was up against a timer, right? And I needed to finish all of this stuff that night, kind of thing. Which I think is good. And then the other part, the other part of the quest or the other part of the event seems to be the big stuff that's built around being really esoteric and tough to figure out. And that's the stuff that sounds like you found really frustrating.
Well, not even frustrating. Like, so the stuff that's esoteric, I think part of it was just like that wasn't in game and it had to be found, right? Like the community update stuff was like somebody would tweet, an official account would tweet like, "Great day to hang out in Eastern Plaguelands," right? And a screenshot of Eastern Plaguelands. It's like, one, I don't want to go check all the things to figure out where that is. Two, I do not know the map well enough to go find where that is. And three, I do not care enough to go find that. Like, that is not fun to me to go find that stuff by myself. So I will, and like, it's not like there's a good like middle way to do that, right? It's not like the core stuff where it's like, and go like 7-5 from here, or like, the clues that were like, find 3 caves in this area, right? Like, it was that I could like reasonably stumble over at my leisure. It was like, here's a screenshot, that's where it is, figure it out. And it's not like somebody, like, theoretically, Wowhead could like develop like a medium hints guide that gave you like, in-game style hints, but nobody does that. Everybody's like, the options are figure it out yourself, or like, go get the coordinates from Wowhead and plug it into TomTom, right? And when faced with those two options, I took the coordinates and plugged it into TomTom.
Yeah, so my steel manning of that side of things is that I don't think that's built for like a single, like, to me that's the stuff that's for the secret finding Discord and like the hardcore people into this. Because have you ever done any of the other secrets in WoW? Like there's like, I think it's called like Waking Nightmare or whatever. It's like a special mount. There's a couple of these. But there's simply like one in expansion.
I don't think I may have done one of them at some point. Oh, like I did the Hand of Ninglemocked or whatever, the gold hand mount from Shadowlands, which required like,
yeah, okay, that's pretty similar. Yeah, so it's just like I think those are built for really hardcore secret finding communities. The WoW secret finding Discord is like a real thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's big. It's got like, I don't know, probably like 100,000 members, right? Like it's just got a huge number of people. And they kind of collectively tackle these things and just sort of brute force it through like the collective will of 100,000, monkeys at typewriters. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like there have been some that have been truly esoteric in the past. The people have had a hard time sort of figuring out. There's one where you do this whole set of things and then it creates a giant grid that's like 20 by 20 or something like that, and you can connect nodes on the grid to one another. And they had to figure out what to draw on the grid, and the answer was like a gear. Like if you drew a gear, you progress to the next piece of the secret. And it's like the only way you find that stuff out is just with like raw manpower, basically, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's what the community posts were sort of there. It's like it is the secret finding puzzle for a hardcore group setting that's in one of these sorts of Discords. I'm not sure that that's good or bad, to be honest with you, because like on one hand I almost want to like protect that in a way. I have this thought. Okay, go for it.
So two things. One, the chance of surprise for it were pretty lame. The thing that like there's a pet that you could get from it is like from doing like 10 of the 12 of them, which is fine.
Okay,
The thing that's
sure.
weird to me is that like I feel like the secrets finding thing was the Mimiron's jump jets, right? Like that was like the more hardcore thing. This thing was
Okay.
like recognizing area, like the community notes thing was the thing that I theoretically could have like. I feel like somebody who has been playing for as long as we have, and had enough experience with the map could reasonably figure these things out. It just wasn't interesting to me, right? Like I mean, and maybe there was like maybe you needed the group effort to find where the post was, scour. Like I think a couple of them were like non-standard backgrounds on like the website or something,
Sure.
which maybe required a little bit of like a team spotting, but and again, something I want to point out is like I'm not saying that this community notes thing was bad. It just wasn't a thing that I found to be fun, right? Like I do not have fun from being like I recognize that area, I can go figure it out. Um, but that I guess that's my point on that. I could continue with what you were saying.
Okay. Yeah, I actually do sort of feel you. Because I think I agree. Probably, yeah, it's a better description for the Mimrom's jump jet things. Um uh because the thing I want to sort of defend about this is like there are big ARGs that work along these lines, and they are fun and interesting to sort of like decode. Like when I think of Five Nights at Freddy's lore, I think of this stuff, right? The reason it is fun to watch a MatPat video about FNAF lore is because a lot of FNAF lore gets delivered in this, like in this sort of way, right? And the process, it's almost like I don't know, it's almost like a speed run video or something like that, but like
Right.
it almost in like an opposite sort of sense. Someone breaking down the process by which this thing was discovered is really interesting and fun to me, right? Um and I just sort of I want to protect that feeling in a way. I feel like mildly protective of it, but I think I probably agree with you that the community notes are the piece of this that hits the worst, and feels the most I don't know. Satchels were testing how to link social media with in-game content in an engaging fashion, and I'm either not the audience for it or this wasn't a good way to do it. Not sure which. Yeah, that's maybe also sort of true, right? The one thing about the Secrets of Azeroth event that I thought was really interesting was how much of an event it is, right? This is sort of the biggest version of this where there's like a real sort of rollout, compared to basically every other secret. I mean, I don't know, in the first one I think is in Warlords. The first true secret is in Warlords, which was very quiet. Then I think there was one in Legion, which is maybe the one that I did, which was Waking Nightmare. Then there was one in Battle for Azeroth that I think was the Hive Mind mount was a secret mount or whatever. And then in Shadowlands, it kind of got officially adopted into some stuff because of the hand, right? Like the special hand mount stuff from 9.1. That was I think secret stuff. And then we sort of get this, and it seems like over time those secrets have gotten more pronounced, I guess, when I
Yeah,
lay them out kind of side by side.
yeah. So I think part of this is also that like the first example of this was actually like wall jumping in class or in vanilla, right? And finding
Mhm.
out things that were behind things or like figuring out how to like raise your spirit so that you could like not die from fatigue and like go out to the little island beneath the compass, right? Like that like didn't actually have any in-game rewards to it, but was grabbed the people who were just kind of into that explory type of stuff. And I actually my guess is that I should look up what is the release date of Warlords of Draenor as compared to
2014.
and what is the release date of Destiny? Because you know who's the master of this
Interesting.
bullshit? 2014, right? September 9th, 2014. Activision or Blizzard, Bungie is the master of this ARG bullshit, right? And Activision published Destiny 1. And so I wonder if this is like somebody who's like, why don't we take all this like weird energy that we get behind like finding things that are unintentional, they're like dev artifacts essentially, and make it into something real, like the Bungie people do, right? And I'm not saying that there's necessarily something like there was explicit communication there, but it wouldn't surprise me if like that kind of thing floated across transims, right? Because Destiny has this kind of stuff, right? Like weird, obscure stuff that you do to get like weapons, right? Like you can even get like exotics out of this, right? Like and, it's it is systematized enough that like there's communities that pop up around it, and you read the guide and you go do it, right? Like honestly, you've done the raids with us. Like the raids are like this, right? Like the raids do not have explicit mechanics. People have to go figure out how to actually fucking do the raids because they're so obtuse, right? So it wouldn't surprise me if that was kind of like the genesis of a lot of this stuff in WoW was, seeing the success that Bungie has had with it. Because I don't know if you remember, but like I think like when we were in high school, like there were like Halo secrets that involved like people walking out into the woods and finding like tubes with like papers in them. So it's obviously WoW has not gotten that crazy yet, but it was a thing. I mean, even going back to like one of the earlier mainstream things was the promotion for was it the Aqua Team? There was a promotion for like a Adult Swim thing that got called in as a bomb threat in Boston when we were in high school. If you remember this at all.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Let me see if I can find this. Swim bomb. Yeah, so on the morning of January 31st, 2007, the Boston Police Department and the Boston Fire Department mistakenly identified a battery-powered LED placards depicting the Moon Knights, characters from the Adult Swim animated TV series Aqua Teen Hunger Force, as improvised explosive devices, leading to a massive panic.
Wow, I've never heard of that before. Holy shit!
Like this was when we were in high school, right? Like I remember it making the news. It's funny looking at it. Because it's clearly not like an IED. It's just like like guerrilla marketing campaign. It being called in as a bomb threat might actually have been the best thing for the show, right? Like, it's one of the like man, this is getting really far afield to video games, but like, do you remember who Tucker Max was? I don't know.
Oh my god, yes. Holy fuck. Of course I do. That was like such a huge controversy at school.
Yeah. So I mean he was like a pre like current culture wars. Like if you talked about him in today's terms, he'd be called like a red pill mansphere influencer or whatever.
Yeah, misogynist.
Yeah.
Sure.
But like people didn't talk about things in that sense before. But he had the similar types of controversies around him. But something that came out at some point was that like some of like the controversy around him was like literally manufactured. Like he had a billboard that got like graffitied. His publicist like arranged for it to be graffitied, right? Like
do you ever wonder what that guy is up to?
Tucker Max.
Let's see what he's been doing.
One half of him went and founded Newsmax. The other half became Tucker Carlson. That's my guess. No,
oh my god! I thought that was real. I was like, oh my god, that would actually sort of make sense.
No. He's 47 now, apparently.
Wow.
Apparently he ghost wrote Tiffany Haddish's memoir. Huh. Yeah. He hasn't done a lot recently.
Okay. You know what? Honestly, good for you, buddy. This is the perfect kind of person who like could have fallen off of the deep end and just become like the worst piece of garbage. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
wait a I always my understanding of this guy was just always that he was sort of just doing kind of shock jock bits, which I'm probably pretty tolerant of. I think history tends to feel good about these people after the fact, right? Like Lenny Bruce or something like that, right? Like from years and years ago, like the dimensions of what we get to sort of talk about tends to end on the side of people are actually pretty open to this kind of thing. So I never went hard on Tucker Max, even if to be fair, I didn't really care also. because I don't drink. I wasn't part of a frat. Like I like that just that whole sort of humor just like went over my head at the time or whatever. But I also think that he, like he could have really gone, I don't know,
Yeah, I
downhill,
mean,
become like a right-wing grifter, right?
I mean, I also think that like a lot of the history around a lot of this is still like waiting to be written, right? Like
Mhm.
right, like the people that I think you're alluding to, right? Like who knows how they will look in the rearview mirror ultimately, right? Like at the time Tucker Max was kind of like in the same space, right? Like and obviously there are some people that are worse than others, right? Like as far as we know, Tucker Max didn't human traffic anyone in Romania. But
True. Yes.
and that's like a thing that you never recover from. But like how, I don't know, like the ultimate legacy of Jordan Peterson. Who knows what that's gonna be at the end of the day, right? Because he's got such like a mixed bag of things, right? Like, um, so
Yeah, it's funny because like I think that there's a lot of in a weird way to sort of loop this back. I actually think that there's a lot of DNA in this sort of secret finding stuff too, like what it was like. Like I think there's a version of college that's sort of this like young adults playground that becomes sort of that gives you a lot of leeway to do shit like this, right? And I remember there was a lot of stuff that was just like fun, interesting, scavenger hunts all around campus or whatever, that has the same sort of DNA as this, secret finding stuff. But the thing that I think is kind of interesting is, and this maybe goes towards other points I've made on the podcast before about like standing on the shoulders of giants or whatever. When I think of when I was a little kid, what it took to win a scavenger hunt or like to be good at a scavenger hunt, that set of skills was pretty minor, but you carry that set of skills forward. And I remember doing this sort of stuff in college, like at college, um, where there were a lot of things that just went way over my head, basically. And then now we get to WoW, or we get to sort of the modern era of like, in FNAF, one of the ways that you discover the secrets to that game is there are tiles on the wall, right? 9 tiles will they won't register anything, right? But if you click on them like a phone number, you or click on them as if they are a number pad, right? You can type in a phone number, and if you type in a phone number that's referenced earlier in the game, you can like hear a special phone call or something kind of along those lines or whatever. It's like I would never in a million years think to guess that sort of shit, right? And I feel like maybe our skills at secret finders getting more and more advanced over time is I don't know, that's interesting. Especially because like, the line between frustrating and satisfying is really thin. In a weird
yeah.
way, I'm thinking of like Baldur's Gate, right? Figuring stuff out in Baldur's Gate was really interesting and gratifying, and I was having a great time, like figuring that stuff out for myself. Um but I imagine there were a couple of puzzles that I complained about, right? The one where it's the book is the answer to the thing, and I thought it was the Idol of Shar, and I was like, obviously it should be the Idol of Shar. I found this thing, I've kept it in Shadowheart's inventory, put in the Idol of Shar, it should work, and it didn't work, and that's like frustrating. I don't know. I think there's I just mentioned a million things and got really off topic, I guess.
No.
Uh,
So I think that makes sense, right? Because like you know, escape rooms are a thing now, right? Which are like based off like an early like early internet flash game genre, right? Like, um, and those are all curated puzzles. But it's interesting because like to link it to like the back halves of several previous episodes, I think the dark mirror of this is like conspiracy theories, right? Like there is some
True.
secret knowledge that real Easter eggs, right? Like the moon landing was shot on a video stage, right? And if you
Oh my god, yeah, there are so many of these. They're so dumb. Oh my god. Like,
but it
obviously
scratches
the
the same
one
itch, right?
yeah. No, it absolutely does. Especially because I think there are a lot of things that are sort of platitudes, right? This is part of my history things, right? There's a lot of platitudes that are really interesting or straightforward. But like one of the things that okay, I'm sorry. Now I want to talk about this backhalf stuff a little bit.
Go for it.
I mentioned the JFK conspiracy, right? The JFK assassination, right? Which is frequently thought of as being a true conspiracy. Why the CIA killed JFK? I didn't know this at the time, but I later saw something last week that was talking about apparently one of the Secret Service agents just published a new book with startling findings. He found a bullet on the like a bullet on the floor of the um motorcade that would have only that only would have come if he was shot from the front, but he never talked about it or whatever. Oh, it explains the magic bullet theory. The magic bullet theory is so dumb, by the way. It is the most bullshit, stupid, idiot stuff. And it fails to comprehend that people's bodies move. And and it's just like that stuff really like scratches an itch in like the human mind, right? But it simultaneously scratches that pattern finding itch that I was talking about, right? But also just sort of the like you've been lied to itch. There's another one of these so last week was 9/11. A week ago actually was 9/11. And in the wake of 9/11, did you ever see the Boondocks comics that like catapulted Aaron McGruder to fame?
I did not.
Okay, so Aaron McGruder, very minor underground sort of comic strip artist, and then 9/11 happens, and he makes a series of comic strips that are so funny. This is how the story goes. It's so funny that they get picked up by newspapers all across the country, right? And what those comic strips is the character Huey, a 10-year-old, African American kid in the suburbs or whatever. When 9/11 happens, he calls like the FBI tip line and he's like, "Hey, I know who did this." And the FBI are like, "Okay, what's up?" He's like, his name is Reagan, Ronald Reagan, Reagan, because he, funded Mujahideen forces in the 1980s when they were fighting against like the Soviets, and that's where Osama bin Laden was a part of that or whatever. It's a very common sort of talking point about this is sort of like a left-leaning conspiracy theory,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
The idea is
that's less it's less a conspiracy theory in the traditional sense, right? Like there's like that's not a secret there. That's an explanatory kind of thing, right? Like
I mean, I think it's more about the poetry than anything.
Okay.
In the sense of is this idea that we made our own worst enemy, right?
Right.
But the point is that's not true. That's not how it would. First of all, the Mujahideen is like a broad. This is the kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that nobody like knows because nobody ever digs into the actual reality, right? Who was the person handing off money in this theoretical version of things where the CIA is funding Osama bin Laden, right? Because bin Laden is fighting in Afghanistan and he is fighting against the Soviets. We are funding the Soviet, war or whatever. How's all that sort of work? And the question is just like, who is actually doing this thing, right? And the answer is nobody. This is how it worked. The CIA provided the funding to Pakistani intelligence services, essentially, under the understanding that the Pakistanis were going to be able to, disperse that funding into the Mujahideen. This was all set up by a Texas congressman named Charlie Wilson. There's a movie about it called Charlie Wilson's War, right? This is just something that was really important because only the United States had the right kind of arms to take down Soviet helicopters that were just like absolutely decimating the Afghan rebels, right? But the Mujahideen is not like a centralized group that even was run by Osama bin Laden. First of all, Osama bin Laden is Saudi. He's not Afghani. And he was only in Afghanistan because there was he was fighting quote unquote the jihad or whatever. And he was bringing a bunch of sort of dark Saudi money to go fight in that war, but he was already opposed to the United States at that time, right?
He comes from like a rich family, right? Like he's got like siblings that like didn't he like go to Harvard or something?
He comes from a Saudi billionaire. There's a super famous like Saudi family that are the Bin Ladens. He's like the black sheep of that family. Basically, went off to become crazy right in the 90s. But so he's fighting. He is the leader of one of these rebel groups that make up the collective of the Mujahideen. But there's no way he. First of all, there's no way he got U.S. funding, and even if he did, he wouldn't have it. Or even if it was offered to him, he would not have accepted it. Right, and this is all like well documented in essentially the history. There's no version of things where we funded and trained the Osama bin Laden to eventually execute this absolutely incredible, one of a kind terror attack in literal like world history.
Yeah, no,
right.
I think the stronger version of this is our meddling overseas helped inflame these tensions that caused the kind of scenario where these types of things would be United States United States meddling caused enough animosity such that people terrorists would consider this to be the type of thing that they wanted to do, but that's a much more 1,000-foot level type of thing than you're saying than the United States.
Yeah, there's also a ton of disinformation about this. There's a really common quote that is attributed to Oliver North, the Iran-Contra guy, who was a Marine general at the time, where he's reported to have said in 1986, during the Iran-Contra scandal, that actually the most dangerous man to America is a Muslim extremist in a cave somewhere named Osama bin Laden, right? He never said this. Even if he had said this, Osama bin Laden was not in a cave in Afghanistan at that time. He only entered, the fight later down the line as part of this sort of, jihad thing where they were fighting their jihad against, and the jihad was not against the United States. It was against the Soviet Union at the time, who were seen as also imperialists. Just there are these two imperial empires who are trying to attack the the Islamic world or whatever. There's maybe a little bit of truth to the relations between the CIA and the Pakistani intelligence agencies.
There's a lot of stuff about proxy war stuff, between the United States and Soviet Union.
Because one of the things
famously, Rocky had a title card that was cut that was dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan or whatever, because at that point they were the view on them was they were freedom fighters against the Soviet Union oppressors. Continue with you.
Yeah, because there's also if there is one thing where America created its own worst enemy, it was building up the Pakistani intelligence agency, because they are the people through whom they were the conduit to get weapons and aid to the Mujahideen, right? That the CIA was essentially giving. And then later on, that intelligence agency was also partially protecting Osama bin Laden in the hunt to actually find him, right? He was famously found not in Afghanistan, but in Pakistan. But even that is just it's not even the same, you're talking 20 years of difference, right? Between 30, right? 2011 is when the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound. There was actually another raid on Osama bin Laden's compound that was I think it was, they got their information 6 days out of date or something like that. Or the raid took 6 more days. And if they had just acted faster, he would have been killed in 2007. Stuff like that. And it's just this sort of conspiracy thinking, this sort of simplified thinking is almost always pretty bad, I guess I would say. And I don't even remember how we got onto this point.
It scratches this itch about how there's some secret knowledge about the world that only you're privy to. But part of this, that's the part that ties the thing into the secrets thing, is that there are these secret conspiracies behind the things, but the people perpetuating can't help but wink at you to be this is any number of current QAnon level conspiracies, and the initials, right, match this thing, right, and they're doing that. I guess the justification is they know that they've got so much over on you that they can laugh in your face by putting in these obvious clues, but if you are serious about keeping conspiracy, you don't name something an anagram of a thing that can let you backfill it. That's the type of thing that video game developers do because it's actually an Easter egg, right? And so that same kind of itch can be successfully harvested for fun things, right? Like for video games, but also like has this darker mirror where people will like, you know, if like people assume that the things are like Batman villains, right? Like that, like, you know, this super villain, like the New World Order is compelled to like leave a riddle for you to solve to like, you know, unwind, you know, like to unwind the, you know, the secret of ping pong comet pizza, right? Like,
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. So the other thing about I think the other thing that people don't understand about conspiracies is the that people are prone to revealing them. This is the thing that got studied in 2016 in a pretty sweeping mathematical paper, right? That was sort of talking about, okay, just on its face, right? The more people who are involved in covering up a secret, the more chances that they have to reveal aspects of that secret such that it will come to light, right? A good example of this might be Edward Snowden, right? Um, he's just one guy. He finds the thing that is happening to be unethical, right? And he leaks it to the media, essentially, right? And there's a bunch of different versions of, you know, like there's a bunch of different versions of this where it's just like all it takes is one person to turn against the spirit of a conspiracy for a conspiracy to unravel, and you can mathematically chart, given the number of people who are in on a conspiracy, how long it will take to unravel, right? One of the things that they sort of what they sort of talk about is if the moon landing was a conspiracy, it would have included, you know, however many thousands of people, right? All these people at NASA, all of these filmmakers, right? Anybody who was working at the film set, right? These are all people who would have to be sworn to secrecy in perpetuity. And sort of the model
or
says that the
killed,
host,
right? Like,
yeah, yeah, and it's like, and the model says that that equation, you know, would say that it would be revealed after 4 years, right? Because
on
someone,
top of that, you've got like an opposed actor, right? Like the Soviet Union is actively looking for, if this was like on a movie set, the Soviet Union was probably searching for evidence that was on a movie set, right? Because they have like, you know, a reason to want that, right? Like, you know, or like, you know, if they suspected it was true, they could, you know, presumably get to the moon themselves and be like, "There's no American flag here," right? Like, you know, that kind of thing, right? Like, but yes, that is true.
are we gonna start? Are we some Dirks talk about astronomy? Can we talk about Theia? You know, the Mars that collided with the Earth and created the moon, and that's probably why there's life on this planet.
Yeah, I mean, there's astronomy is fucked no matter what way you look at it, right? Just because
there's, you know, it's funny. There's also an astronomy conspiracy theory. I personally love this one because it's crazy and hilarious. Which is that there was a massive nuclear bomb essentially that went off in the United, or not in the United States, in the Earth during this primordial era, and just like tons and tons of super fissible, right, like uranium and plutonium in this era, which is all like super radioactive or whatever, essentially creates the most insane nuclear bomb of all time, and it explodes the moon out into orbit. That one's probably not true. We are pretty confident, or astronomers are pretty confident, in the Theia theory, which is, you know, this gigantic asteroid collides into the Earth and sort of spins out the moon and the Earth. But yeah, it's probably why, you know, it's probably why there's life on planet Earth.
yeah, no, I mean, there's, I don't know, I don't know the astrophysics super well, and it's also one of those things where like, you know, just because like we don't know enough that like some things might turn out to be different, right? Like, and I don't know. I'm not speaking as a learned person in these things, but I think there is at least some merit to the idea that maybe the original bacteria on Earth came from Mars or something, right? Like that's the type of thing that like might be a conspiracy theory, right? Like, you know, there's like a you know, a fucking Halo version of this where like, you know, it's the pre-runners and they like threw bacteria at Earth or something. But like there's I and, you know, again, don't quote me on any of this. I'm not speaking as someone who like, you know, has like an authoritative view on any of this, but like it might be the case that the originations of life on Earth came from Mars. and like, but because this is so unknown, right? Like like astrobiology is like a very new field, and it's kind of like still all theory at this point, right? Um, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think my understanding, there's a couple of things. One is you have to be in sort of this habitable zone where liquid water exists, given like sunlight or whatever. Another thing is Jupiter is really important because Jupiter is called the vacuum cleaner of the solar system. It's so huge that its gravity well will suck in like asteroids and comets and stuff in order to protect, the like essentially the planet Earth from impacts that would just like devastate the atmosphere and everything, right? And this apparently happened I didn't even know about this. This apparently happened in the 90s where there was a comet that was on a collision course for Earth, but NASA scientists had figured out that it was going to get destroyed by Jupiter, but it would have been a planet. It probably would have destroyed the planet if it had hit the planet Earth, but because when it enters the solar system it gets warped by Jupiter's gravity well, and I think it like broke up into a bunch of different pieces or something like that, right? Like Jupiter has a lot to do with how we are protected from those sorts of cosmological impacts or astrological impacts or whatever.
Sure. I think
Yeah.
the asteroid belt also does something similar. I could be wrong about
True.
that.
Yeah.
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 I don't know I'm sorry, my brain is like all over the place
Don't
today.
worry.
I'm like having the hardest time saying anywhere on topic. Okay, this is like some derps talking about fun facts for an hour.
Yeah. Dirks talk about conspiracies, right? Like,
Yeah.
But yeah. But so given that these are things that we know that like really scratch itch in the human brain, what do you think makes for successful
ARGs?
Yeah, successful ARG, successful kind of like I guess there's two levels of this. Like there's the ARG aspect, and there's also kind of like the level of satisfaction to be, or level of complexity to be satisfying, right? Like,
But he really showing how much he needs those ADHD meds today. Yeah,
yeah.
listen, I didn't sleep well last night. It's a stray launch week. Oh, it's the whole thing. Okay, I think to me the biggest thing is that there has to be a good sort of okay, here, hold on. Actually, I have a thing for this, which I don't know that we've ever talked about this on the podcast. Have we ever talked about my theory that there is always like every game necessarily has a story, there's always a plot, there's always a narrative?
You mentioned
right?
this, I think, years ago, but yes.
Yeah, this is one of my, this is sort of like a media theory. One of the things that's unique about games require...
we haven't talked about Reaganomics yet. We're not going to. So
yeah, listen, Bidenomics, man, I'm on board. Let's go. The one of the things that all games require, right, is interactive input. You can't have a game. The media theory is super complicated, but one of the things that makes games unique is the interactive nature between the sort of author and the audience, right? A movie, when you turn it on, it just goes, it just plays, right? You don't have to sit there and watch it in order for the movie to happen. But with a game, if you walk away, the game pauses, it stays still, it can't move because it requires this sort of regular sort of input. My sort of theory on a sort of like philosophical level is that this creates by necessity a story and a protagonist, right? Because you, the player, the protagonist. Most stories, most protagonists are about people who are getting better and overcoming obstacles. It's changed. That's the story. Every story has a protagonist that changes over time, and games are fundamentally sort of these change machines, right? Because you enter in, even playing a game like Tetris, this is always the example I'm using, right? Even playing a game like Tetris, you, the player, are the protagonist, and you are changing to get better at Tetris over time, right? So that the first minute you play Tetris, you're pretty bad at it, but by the time you play Tetris for 20 hours, you're pretty good at it, right? That's the story arc of the game. And I view this ARG stuff in a very similar sort of vein, right? The successful ARGs to me are ones that are essentially like plotless stories in a way. which are it is about being able to it's about like being able to make that MatPat video, right? And explain, oh, what I did was I went and I, like I manipulated the image in Photoshop and increased the contrast. And when I did that, I found that there were these hidden artifacts that spelled out a number, and then I used that number and I put this over here. And I think that when that puzzle is sort of a fun puzzle to recite to someone, I think that's when you have a really successful sort of ARG along, right? When the puzzle is kind of esoteric and impossible to follow, that's when I think that the puzzle is unfun and uninteresting, right? When I did that ARG, when I did that ARG COD for, or I'm sorry, when I did that secret in WoW for the Waking Nightmare, there's a piece in that you can't solve for. You have to get to the bottom of the puzzle because it is unique to your character, which is one of the things I think is the most interesting piece of this. They basically created a puzzle that was about it's about you need to highlight 6 beacons, right? And it's a maze, but the maze is procedurally generated based on something on like your WoW account. So every person's individual maze was different. So even if you went to Wowhead and you were going through that process, you kind of like had to solve it yourself, right? And that process of going through, following the secret as it's getting uncovered by the community, keeping up with like the different, new like stuff that's been uncovered, the new clues or hints that people have found out. There's something really enthralling about that, and I definitely got caught up in it. I did all of this in just like in one night, and I remember staying up to like 3 or 4 in the morning just to get to the bottom of it, especially because that maze takes a while. It took me like 2 hours to get through the maze because I eventually just started charting it in an Excel sheet so that I could see where I was going. And by the way, the maze is not 2-dimensional, it's 3-dimensional, which fucks with my brain so hard. But anyway, and I think that's when it's satisfying, right? When it grips you along this sort of I'm solving the, I'm solving the conspiracy theory. I'm doing the, CSI detective work to get the thing done. When I don't know, when there's not that component and you're just sort of running through the steps, I think it can be satisfying as sort of like an onlooker, but I'm not sure that the puzzle itself is any more satisfying than that. Does that make sense? Am I delineating these?
Maybe. Interesting. So this is interesting because one of the things that I've been playing over the past week is I popped back into Baba Is You, which is a puzzle game that feels extremely satisfying when you get it, but can be immensely frustrating when you can't figure out the answer. But part of the issue is that like there is a puzzle that I'm stuck on right now that I could go look up the answer, but like that's like the entire game, right? Like
Sure.
At that point, it's like, why am I even doing this, right? I'm just like putting in inputs, and it's not even like it's not like there's a story to the game that I'm like wanting. Like it's not like I get like like adventure games with moon logic, right? Like that's like a common thing that happens in adventure games. It's like they're impossible to like understand because like it's nonsense. Like those, like I have played like Deponia. I have played the first 3 games of the Deponia series, and it's just like a standard adventure game, and by Daedalic Entertainment, and like at certain points I just like didn't care, but I wanted to see the rest of the story, right? Like essentially it was playing out like a too complicated comic book. And I was just like following the steps because I thought some of the puzzles were dumb, but I still enjoyed it from that aspect. But like, with Baba Is You, the only point is to actually like solve the puzzles. And so I wonder if some of that is like the optionality of it as well, right? Like if I get stuck in the WoW thing, I can always go look it up, and there's like a ceiling on the level of frustration I can get from it. That wasn't like possible in the pre-internet era. Um, I think that helps too, right? Like to your point about the story, if there's a story that goes along with it, right, then like I'm willing to excuse the more frustrating elements, so I'm at least getting something else out of it, right? Like this community patches, like these community satchels, I literally just wanted the pet out of it. And so like while I found it annoying, at the end of the day I didn't care so much because like I could go follow a guide online and not have to worry about it. Right? Like my gut is that like this nightmare thing is like if I didn't care about solving the maze, I would be incredibly frustrated by that because like I don't care about solving it myself. I just want to I just want the mount at the end of the tunnel, right? Like and maybe that's part of it too. Is that like the extrinsic reward has to like maybe this is part of it. Like in all ARGs, right? Like there's an extrinsic reward at the end of the tunnel, right? Like it's rarely ever like it's not like it's a thing. There's not like a thing itself for it to be, right? It's not like the ARG is the game, right? It can't be because nobody can solve the game by themselves, right? Like there has to be like like in I think so I Love Bees was like the classic Halo one. It's like you got like a trailer for Halo 2 or 3, I forget which one. And that was the thing that was shared by everybody, but like it was still like an extrinsic reward at the end of the day. Maybe that's part of it too. Yeah, any thoughts on that?
There's a part of me that wants to. It's interesting because like man, I really love these FNAF videos. These, which is sort of what I'm. It sounds like
Sure.
you're saying that is unappealing, right?
Well,
Which is just like
the FNAF video is appealing. Like you like the FNAF videos, right? Have you ever gone and done it yourself?
well, no, but right. This is sort of the needle I'm trying to thread. I got the same feeling watching a bunch of FNAF ARG lore videos, right, where someone is unraveling the ARG in real time, right? That I got when I did the Waking Nightmare secret, right? Which was me unraveling the ARG in real time, right? And it's to me, it's that sort of story that links those two, right? Because the puzzles are satisfying, and even though I'm just going through the steps, right, I'm just moving through seeing how people figured out how to do what's next was interesting and kind of compelling. But when ARGs like stuff like this has sort of missed me is sort of when that I don't know, there's something about that doesn't make neurons in my brain fire. Does it make sense?
Vaguely.
It's the same. It's the same phenomenon. Even though I'm going through the motions. In one of them, I'm watching a video where someone tells me how he went through the motions. In the other one, I'm reading a Wowhead article that coaches me to go through the motions. I feel like I'm getting the same level of satisfaction there. Is the answer just that you don't like FNAF lore videos, Meg?
No. So here's the thing, right? Like unless like like this thing you're telling me about the dial pad on the wall, right? Like
yeah,
if that pad being on the wall is like integral to this story of like the purple man who killed all the children and put their souls in bears or whatever, however that goes, right? Like if that's just like a means to the end of the story, I don't think I care about the means. I care about like I'm interested in the story, like in the hidden lore there, right? Like in the same way that in like Elden Ring, I am interested in Vatividia breaking down the implications of all of these things that are on like the item descriptions, right? Jigsaw puzzles, interesting, right? Like jigsaw puzzles are interesting, like just because like when I'm not a huge fan of jigsaw puzzles, right? Like
wow, get fucked. Okay,
no,
right.
No, I personally just like I don't find them super compelling because it's just kind of like pattern matching, right? Like this is actually interesting. I don't find solving Rubik's cubes to be interesting. Once they found out there's an algorithm for solving a Rubik's cube, I don't find it interesting anymore. Right?
I know. So okay, I will agree with you, right? I would agree with you. But are there There have to be puzzles where finding those algorithms is really satisfying, right?
Um, Interesting. So like,
Okay, so I've told you about the water sort puzzles I sometimes do, right?
water sort.
Yeah, so they're puzzles where you have a bunch of vials, and the vials have colors at different levels, and you can pour one color into another color, right? But you can't pour you can pour red onto red, but you can't pour red onto yellow, right? And you get two empty vials and a bunch of mixed matched vials. And the idea is you sort through all of the things until you have one vial that is solidly of each color, right?
Okay.
Okay. So it's a puzzle. It's almost like Sudoku. It's like
Right.
it's like any of these sort of like puzzles. I have done a million of these. And I have learned a lot of like tactics and strategies, right? For instance, it is one of the things I had to learn in order to solve a puzzle was the value of an empty vial. Being able to find an empty vial, like there's you have this in this game or whatever. I think kind of an intuitive thing is people go, oh, I'm going to fill a vial. I have one green in a vial. I'm going to put all of the green on top of it. But it's actually typically better to take that one green and stash it somewhere so you have an empty vial, because you can put anything into an empty vial, right? And that's like a really valuable thing, right? That is sort of algorithmic, right? And at this point I have kind of refined my own internal algorithm that says finding empty vials is really useful. Try and zero in on individual single vials, right? What I'm trying to do most of the time now is I look at a vial and I see, okay, these are the colors that I need to clear to get an empty vial, and that's what's valuable and meaningful to me. That's stuff that I've only come to after 250 of these things or something like that, right? But it is essentially me solving for an algorithm myself, right? That's what's compelling. In a world in which I'm doing that for a Rubik's Cube, I'm sure that I would find that compelling. But if in a world in which I have looked up and memorized the algorithms, I think I agree with you. Does that make sense?
That absolutely does, right? Like,
Okay.
because the skill of Rubik's cubes is doing it quickly, I don't find it interesting, right? Like you
Yep.
like at some point there's no point in deriving the algorithm yourself, I guess. Yeah, no, that makes, because I do some one of the games I play on my phone. Well, I've been playing Microsoft Bejeweled recently just because it's like they're on their Xbox app, and I've gone through the similar thing. But there's this game. It's a weird game. It's like you have like a grid of numbers, and like there are nodes with numbers on them, and like so it's a grid, and there are nodes with numbers on them, and you can draw up to two lines out of each side, and the lines can't cross each other, and the idea is to connect all the nodes together. And like each node has to have the number of lines attached to it that are on its thing. But like similarly, right? Like a 3 with only two sides open, you have to one at least has to go in each direction, because you can only put two in each if a 3's in a corner, right? One has to at least go right and one has to at least go down. Um it may,
Oh yeah, Megan's gonna shit on jigsaw puzzles. Meanwhile, this guy plays the most basic ass pumpkin spice mom game on the market.
So the reason I play Microsoft Bejeweled is because it gives me Gamer Pass points, and eventually I will earn a month of Game Pass for free. And that is a very bad reason, but it's also like these are the games that I play when I'm either on the toilet or when I'm listening to a podcast, probably both.
Yeah.
And so they're like fairly mindless, but I get what you're saying, right? Like I have developed a set of strategies around this like line linking game. That like
Yeah, because to me that's maybe the dividing line, right? If someone can pitch me on this is how I figured out the puzzle as like on and I can get kind of swept up in that sort of story, I'm on board for it, right? And then there's the alternate version of if I'm put in a position where I need to derive my own sort of thoughts and theories, right? And tactics and strategies in order to make like they work, that's also pretty satisfying, right? The version I find unsatisfying is one where I am handed the algorithm, right? Rubik's cubes are satisfying. WoW secret finding is satisfying. Or no, I'm sorry, Rubik's cubes are not satisfying. WoW secrets are satisfying, and FNAF lore videos are satisfying. I'm trying to categorize this so that I can be consistent.
I wonder how much. Yeah, no, I wonder how much of this is like, at least for me, is like based on like obscurity and solvedness. How do you feel about chess?
I like chess as To be honest, I don't like chess now all that much, but the thing I like about chess is that different players can have different play styles, and they are relatively in like the middle range of chess playing. They are relatively unique. Sort of okay, I'm sorry. The thing I like about chess, I used to play chess against my dad all the time, right? Um and one of the things that's true about chess with my dad is he likes knights. He likes doing knight tricks, right? And so I know when I'm playing against my dad, his knights are really valuable. Killing his knights is huge. If I can nail his knights to the wall, that's huge. My dad knows that I like rooks, right? I am looking to clear pieces off the board because the fewer rooks have a hard time moving in the early and mid game because there's a lot of pieces on the board. They get all gummed up, right, with pawns or whatever. So I'm looking to trade pretty aggressively, right? I wanna break these pawn stalemates. I want to go hard so that I can clear out the board so that I can find rook checkmates, right? Which are a really common way of checkmating. You like you put the enemy king in 2 lines of rooks, and that's like a really common checkmate. That's fun chess to me, and I think he and I have made that like he and I had a sort of a metagame that's fun. The version of chess that is grandmasters playing to these like memorized sort of ends and stalemates and stuff like that, I think that's boring and uninteresting. I'm like not super into, like I watched the down the rabbit hole version about Deep Blue. Do you know about this?
Yeah. No, so
It's like that.
this is interesting because like I feel similarly, right? Like I don't. Once I found out that high level chess was like all about like memorizing plays and then kind of like doing that, it's like I totally lost interest in it.
Yeah.
Um, but like there's a part of me that thinks that like that's also falling into the kind of like, well, you can't play Master Yi because he's like not any good at plat level problem, which is interesting. But I think part of that too is one, there's like I said, an obscurity factor, right? Like,
Sure.
like some of these games that we're talking about probably have like solvable solutions, but like no one bothers to because like, like Sudoku is popular. If you want to be good at Sudoku, you could probably go read a guide on it, right? But like these games we're talking about are like niche enough that no one like you could maybe go find a forum with it, but it's not like, it's not like somebody's writing a column about it in somewhere where you might read it incidentally. But like the other part of this too, I think is like a personal skill aspect, right? Like chess does not require any manual dexterity, right? And League of Legends kind of does, right? Like there's like a level of this is why like they won't show you tower ranges on the ground, because there's like a feeling. This is also true of fighting games, right? Which is interesting because I was going to talk about fighting games in the back half. And I don't have the same problems with fighting games, although sometimes I kind of get close to it. Of like, is a fighting game too close to solved for me to like want to play it? Yeah, I think that's. I wonder how much this unwinds back. I think this is maybe why I bounce off of ARGs, is because there's like basically only ever one solution, right? Like maybe I'm gonna go back on my thing. Like I think my problem with the maze thing that you were talking about is that I don't think mazes are interesting, right? Because mazes are just about like iterating until you like map out the entire thing. It's just a brute force problem, right? It's not like you have a strategy for a maze, right? Or insofar as you do, it's not like it's an iterative. It's not like you're solving a set of mazes that you can then deduce about, right? Like my best strategy for solving any given maze as part of another set of puzzles is to brute force it and be done with it, because I'm probably not going to solve another set of mazes, right? Like if Dragonflight, instead of having dragon races, had like dragon mazes, I guess maybe I would feel differently because I'd be like solving problems about it, right? Like I'd be able to develop like my own set of internal algorithms, like you're talking about. But my sense is that mazes just like aren't, like mazes are only interesting to me insofar as like there's like set theory that you can apply to it or something.
Okay, so I want to say that this maze would maybe be this maze has some like interesting, it's kind of like a maze with like a teleporter, and like also like I said, it's 3D, right? So you could go, for instance, you could go in a circle, and you could go room 1, 2, 3, 4, and you could expect to go to room 1, but you're actually going to room 5, because what you're doing is you're going down, you're spiraling down, and you are now under 5 is under room 1. But you don't know any of this stuff, right? You are walking into doors, and the screen fades to black, and it fades up to a new room with new sort of dimensions, if that makes sense, right? um that is what makes the maze fun. And the other thing is the teleporting. There are spots in the maze where you will teleport to other spots in the maze, and you kind of also need to like deduce some stuff. Essentially, my point is, I think this maze is cool and interesting, and I love the fact that I had to solve it on the spot,
Okay.
right? And I had to, to be fair, I guess I could have looked up. I'm sure other people would have said, and I did eventually do this, I guess. I didn't quite solve it with brute force. I tried solving it with brute force, and then I essentially solved it with cartography. I just drew a map in Excel, which was interesting because like it also included this problem of like, how do you represent there's one thing under another thing? How do you do 3D in Excel or whatever? But like I said, it's
Multiple sheets is the easy
but
answer there.
yeah. But the thing that's interesting about chess is I feel like a lot of that is about the meta, right? It's kind of like Hearthstone, right?
Yeah.
Or like in houses in League of Legends or Clash or something like that. When you're playing to an interesting meta, I think that can make a game much better. Me playing to the meta of my dad and I play a lot of chess against each other and know each other really well as opponents. I think that's pretty interesting, but I don't think I'm really interested in chess against randos, right? It's not like I would go like queue into match-made chess, because like that sort of has the same feeling of queuing into match-made League of Legends is not super interesting because I can't see the other team. I don't know who their best champions are. Do you know what I mean? Like all that stuff, right? And there was another thing I was and my other thing about chess, which is also that and you and I disagree on this, is that I think a core piece of strategy is reacting to the unknown, and there are no unknowns in chess, right? The only thing that's unknown is you can be surprised by like your opponent doing unexpected things, but everything that your opponent could do is visible to you sort of on the board. Whereas like to me, a good strategy game has to include some level of obfuscation of like whether that's fog of war in StarCraft or the intensity of the numbers in StarCraft. That's technically not RNG, right? But it's also just stuff like true RNG, or like playing
I was
playing
gonna
a
say,
game.
this is the thing where the thing I disagree with you is not about the unknown. It's about randomness that like I don't like pure.
Yeah. Okay.
Randomness.
Well, so maybe the randomness that I think that we support the most is when I load up a game of CK3. Total War does this. This is really what I want to. Total War has special modifiers in the AI code that says these are great powers, right? This is also true, I'm pretty sure, in EU4. I may be in CK3, but I don't know. Which is to say that when you start a new game, certain groups start the game with kind of enhanced AI. They are more aggressive, they're better, they're stronger, they're smarter. And that the nature of that AI means that they will snowball into some level of victory, right? So for instance, in one of my Total War games, that AI right now is the Greenskins, but in another one of my Total War games, that AI is the Empire, right? And that creates different contours for sort of the playing against it, right? This is maybe I think this is probably the simplest. We will all probably agree this is a pretty harmless / good use of AI in a strategy, or RNG rather, in a strategy game.
That's interesting because that solves like I know historically I have problems with like these grand strategy games that like where the AI just kind of like where like I have said before, like I don't like playing Civ against the computer because it's just kind of like cheating. I like playing against other players because it's like this is exactly the type of thing you're talking about, right? Like I like playing against other players because like there's a level of like knowing your opponent that you kind of like can't like the way a Civ AI works is like it has a bunch of extra resources that you don't, and so it's hard to reason about, right? Like. And it's not super interesting to reason about because you're not playing against somebody smarter. You're just playing against somebody with like bigger numbers than you. But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right there. There's like something feel like there's a thing here about like my desire. Like I like winning with like weird win conditions, like particularly in like Magic the Gathering, right? Like I think there's something there to that too because it's about developing a strategy that like is like not typical. Like I watch some Magic the Gathering content now, and like I do not care about like any meta discussion stuff. I just care about like cool cards doing cool things, doing cool combos, right? Like
No, I completely understand. This is why I think Commander is the better version of Magic rather than, typical 60 card.
So
Just like
I don't know if it's like Commander's neat. I actually kind of like. I think this is I think my point to the obscurity thing is like I like formats with restricted card sets that aren't popular because like no one solved them yet, essentially, right?
oh,
Like
interesting. Sure.
right, like fine, like it is. I think Pauper is a big enough format that like it's pretty solved now, or it's got pretty heavy meta around it. Um, but like I think there's a point in like something like a format like that. It's like you can only use this stuff, and you can go for it, and you can figure out your own way to win. And it's not like he'll get blown out of the water every time. I think Popper still holds on to that a little bit just because like the power level is a little bit suppressed, right? Like one of my frustrations with Magic the Gathering is like unless the thing I cooked up on my own happened to be a meta deck, like the way I usually deal with this is I ignore the meta entirely, put on blinders, and like I play what I want. But like usually that like tops me out around like gold in arena, and it's like I don't want to go if I have to go look online to find a meta deck. I will stop having fun. I don't like piloting a deck is not the fun part of Magic to me. It's building the fun deck.
Yeah, that is interesting because like I like playing inside of the meta. I like choosing a deck inside of the meta and getting really good at that deck because then it's about like matchup spreads, right? And it's like, can I beat this spread essentially, right? If control warrior into control warlock is 60-40, can I be part of that 40 essentially, right? And I think that stuff is pretty interesting. But I feel like that's like two sides of the coin because I also do like one of the things I also like doing in Hearthstone sometimes is just like piloting off meta decks and using like the off meta advantage, right? I was playing a deck not long ago that was an incredibly hyper aggressive war. Right now, the best warrior deck in the game is a control warrior deck, right? It sort of stalls for a while, it finds a win condition, and then it blows you out of the water with this huge armor gain and a card that says every time you gain armor, you gain that much attack, right? And so you just play a bunch of shield blocks and whatever, and you gain 20 attack, and then you hit them in the face for 1,000,000 damage, right? And I was playing an incredibly aggressive deck, right? Because the thing is, when people are playing against Control Warrior, they're like, oh, I'm gonna mulligan for the late game, right? And then I hit there and I'd play just the most aggressive, powerful, beat your face, version of like a warrior deck, and you're taking advantage of sort of the off meta thing. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't know that you could. I don't know. I think you can get legend with anything in Hearthstone. To be honest with you, it's mostly just reps. If I'm being completely honest, right? And I think the biggest mistake that people make when climbing to legend in Hearthstone is they switch decks. The best way to get legend in Hearthstone is to just make one deck and get really good at piloting it. But you're getting really good at piloting it into the meta, right? You have to understand the meta in order to kind of get there. But yeah, anyway, that's that stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think we've started blending into our week, so I'm gonna talk about something that's like
Sure.
relevant there. I finally hit platinum in Street Fighter on Zangief.
Let's go.
Platinum is top 30% of players, so it's not like super impressive or anything. But like, it's interesting because like I feel like the way I kind of like leveled up my game is there is this commentator, Say Jam. He has a YouTube channel. He mostly streams like his YouTube channel. It's like clips from his stream. I started like he is doing this thing where he climbs to master on all the characters because it's like his fundamentals are super good, and like it's like and so I like watched him play a bunch of Zangief, even though that's like not like his preferred style of character, and it's like I just like started picking up things he was doing, and that like really up leveled my game, which felt like very satisfying, right? It's like oh, like there's this combo that he kept doing, and like breaking that down, understanding why it worked. Essentially, so Zangief's forward heavy punch is a headbutt. Classic Zangief move. The thing that I think is typical of this move, and it's definitely true in this game, is that it is plus on block, which means you still have advantage. Even if the move is blocked, you still have advantage. It's still your turn coming out of it. And so this thing he would do is this headbutt into a hell stab into a lariat. And the thing there that is interesting is that's like a classic frame trap. So for those at home that don't know, a frame trap is like so the headbutt gives me advantage on block, but there's still a gap there. So like There's essentially after I headbutt, to do the hell stab, there will be a 3-frame gap where the opponent can do something. But like I think the fastest move in Street Fighter is 4 frames, um, and so like if they hit a button, I will hit them with the hell stab, right, and that will combo into the lariat. Um, and so they kind of have to block, but like it works well enough because people don't always know that and like know that's what you're going for. And so the game then is like I headbutt, I hell stab, and I lariat, and I do that enough times so that like you basically condition them to block, and then when they block out of the headbutt, I do a spinning pile driver, which is it's a grab, so it'll beat the block, but it is slow enough that they could theoretically beat it with a jab. Um,
Mhm.
or like a jump or something like that. And so like that kind of interaction was basically what put me there. And that's also like super fun to me, like learning all those things. And like a lot of Zangief's game plan is about conditioning and also cold reads, right? Like some of the most satisfying moments to me are like this guy jumps a lot, right? Like it's like because one of the easiest ways to get out of like when you are standing up out of down, right? One of the easiest ways to beat a throw is to jump because you can't throw somebody who's in the air, right? And like if I see that this guy constantly jumps, Zangief's level 1 super is an anti-air. And so like the smarter way to do it would be to wait for the jump and do it on reaction because I think you could still do that. But like I will like put in the input and throw it out, and the person will like be like 1 frame in the air and it'll work, right? I'm just like, oh, that feels so good. Um, and so that's things that I think this ties into this discussion, right? Like this one of the things I like about Zangief a lot is like he's very reads based. It feels really good to do reads. There's also another thing that um, Jam has been doing, which is or was doing in his streams where he's like getting Zangief up to mastery. It's like he will jump and say, I bet they won't expect this," and just like throw out his level 3 ult. And it works a fair amount of times. And it's like, maybe I should do that more. And I do it more and it works. It's like, oh, it feels so good. Part
Yeah,
of
I feel you. I think getting those sorts of just like beating them on the read is the most satisfying shit. I don't know. There's some times where this happens to me in Hearthstone pretty commonly where um something that somebody said once that has really stuck with me is you have to play to win. You can't play to not lose. Have you ever heard that? Uh
yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
and people I have also heard this in regards to like magic, right? Which is that like a lot of the times people will obsess defensively, right? They will their point is not um is they are not looking for game winning plays, they are looking for not losing plays, right? So an example of this was I was playing a game of Hearthstone recently where I was playing control warlock and I was playing against another control deck, and that control deck had summoned a lot of big guys on the board, but I was at 30 health, right? I was really healthy. Actually, I think I was maybe like 38 health or something like that. I had this weapon equipped, um, and I realized I had 2-turn lethal if I played around this right. I basically had the choice between I can clear their board. They had a bunch of big guys. They were maybe let's say they were dealing like 25 damage to me if they just sent everything face, right? But I could also sort of set up for lethal by instead of playing my defensive cards, play offensive cards. And I went um uh and so I instead of clearing their board, I just kind of went face. And I felt like I was in that guy's head where he was like, he doesn't have it. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna hit him in the face with all of my shit. And he got me down to like 8 HP, but then the next turn I just won, right? Because I had set up the previous turn for this sort of like lethal. And I feel like that is a skill that I see a lot of people lack, I guess, in these kinds of competitive sort of like PvP games, right? Um
Yeah. No,
they're just like, yeah.
that's definitely true. That definitely. If I want to talk about an example from us, right? We were playing Commander at PAX
Mhm.
East, and like that game where like I was just like dominating with AC the Geyer straight. I was just like I was playing way too defensively, and I was like refusing to kill people. But you're absolutely right. The thing to do there is to just like go for the throat. Um, no, that makes total sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you because there's that feeling of Commander is also interesting because there's like big groups and swinging leaves you like makes you feel very vulnerable, right? Because all of your stuff is tapped or whatever. Um, but I don't know. There's something about going. I was, you know what I was doing? I was playing poker actually, funnily enough, a couple of weeks ago, and I ended up losing uh to honestly I would say some like bullshit. But you know, it was just like a bunch of us. We were just like killing like an hour or two before we were going to dinner or whatever. So I was like playing really aggressively. But I think everybody at the table just had it. Maybe they hadn't played a lot of poker before or whatever. They were very like, you know, with the chips. I was like constantly like pushing people all in, right? If I thought I had a winning hand, if I thought I was gonna if I thought I was gonna like take if I thought I was gonna take it, I was driving people in because you have to play, you know, I don't know, you have to play aggressively, which is funny because typically, you know, that's like the opposite of what a control player likes, right? I like being defensive. My typical state of, you know, state of being is to play defensive in a lot of these kinds of games, and I think of myself as being a defensive minded player. It is more fun to me to win a game of Hearthstone where I run an aggressive deck out of resources and I weather a ton of hits and then I go over the top for the victory than it is for me to play a game of Hearthstone where I stick a bunch of minions in the first 4 turns and just go face and I like, you know, that but I don't know, there's something about playing to win versus playing to not lose that has been on my mind a lot recently.
Oh, see, this is interesting because I think this like back in like early Hearthstone, where it's like faces to place like face hunter, right? Like I think that's like a lot of people like. It's funny because like that archetype is like play to win, right? Like don't play to and like because that play style was like what it was. It like I think it forced a lot of people who otherwise don't play that way into that kind of mindset, which is interesting, right? It's like just go face, right? Like don't think about it, go face, and that is like forcing the play to win type of aspect, right? Like I think that's neat.
I miss those days. Well, I guess I don't super miss those days of Hearthstone because Control Warrior still exists and everything like that. But Control Warrior in Classic was a lot of fun for that sort of reason, right? Because you could, it's a lot harder in modern Hearthstone to run aggressive decks out of resources. That's just like not a thing that happens as much anymore. But you know, back in the day, that was the getting a zoo deck. Just clearing a zoo deck board every turn, you know, turn after turn. That's like a fun thing, I guess. Anyway, what else have you been playing? Have you been playing Starfield?
I have not. Just between like other kind of like usage things that have been taking up my time. Not because I don't like it, but like I've been putting more time into Baldur's Gate. I've been playing a lot of part of this is like a lot of my time over the past week has been like short bursts, and so that Street Fighter or Baba is you, right? Like not like something like Baldur's Gate or Starfield where I need to have a chunk of time that I can sit down and sink into. Um, and so that's the difference there. Something I have been doing is rewatching some like we're talking about these like bunchies of King of these Secret stuff. I went and rewatched Mandalore Gaming's set of videos on the Marathon series.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because that's a game that has like that's a game series that has a bunch of like nonsense like hidden information in it about like what the real story is. So that was fun. Um, but yeah. What about you? What have you been playing?
Total War is a big one. Starfield. We finished Baldur's Gate, I guess is one thing I will say. We finished Baldur's Gate. Gotta be honest, I was a little disappointed by the end because of how some stuff played out. Um, are you in Baldur's Gate yet?
I think technically I just got past the Steel Watcher, who like
Okay, so you got through the gate.
Yeah.
Did you go to the coronation?
No.
You would have gotten that quest, I'm sure, right?
So I jumped around I jumped into the city I jumped past the Steel Watcher on like the backside. I think there's a way to do that.
Oh.
And I basically the only thing I have done in the city right now, and I don't know if I'm like truly in the city is I like went to the brothel and looked around, mostly because I was solving the murder in the Abbey.
Right. Oh, okay. So you're not at the coronation part yet.
No.
Here's my recommendation. When you get the quest for the coronation, do that quest. Rachel and I basically figured out that the game has a lot of tolerance for a lot of different game states, but we fucked up a bunch of quests because you go to a thing, you get this invite to the coronation, and we're like, we'll go to the coronation later. And we didn't, and we did everything, literally everything else in the city, and we did the coronation last. But because we had cleared through all of these like quests or whatever, it didn't trigger properly, and it basically kind of like kind of like fucked the whole back end of the like experience for us, which is really like unsatisfying if I'm being honest. Some quests that should have had satisfying resolutions didn't have satisfying resolutions because of how we chose to sort of approach things or whatever. But it's not, but like it's also so far back. Like we did everything in Baldur's Gate. We did every side quest we possibly could before attending this coronation ceremony, right? So yeah, I don't know. Don't make my fucking mistakes, Mango.
No, that's it's interesting because like this we've talked about like how it feels like they apparently put a lot of effort into like making that hard to do in general, right? Like I was watching a video this week about how like if like the tieflings in town in the grove get killed, mostly if you kill them, there are replacement NPCs that will show up for them.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Including this is the one that apparently doesn't work super well, but like it's a little bit buggy, but like if you have a character in your party in the grove, when the rest of your party finishes the goblin fort, there's a character that will run in and tell you that everybody's leaving. So that it doesn't they don't just like disappear. When you come back, which is it's like the title of the video is like only 0.01% of people have seen this character. I've been getting increasingly annoyed by YouTube video titles.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I don't know. It was frustrating. Act 3 is really unpolished. There's a lot of bugs. We ran into a lot of issues. There's a bunch of quests that are uncompletable because like just how we chose to tackle those quests kind of left them in our inventory, right? Like so where it's like, we have to go talk to a guy and he's dead on the ground. There's nothing you can do. That quest is forever in our fucking inventory, right? Because it just like didn't it like didn't update properly. I don't know, is what it is. Overall, I still had a very good time with Baldur's Gate. I want to play more Baldur's Gate in just sort of like a party setting, in the sense of like playing it like an adventure path where we all sort of know where this is going, we know where this is headed, we know where some of the stuff is, right? I found a bunch of cool stuff that's like, oh, I would love the idea. The really thing I want to play is I want to play with no companions. I want to play the game with no companions. I want to say this is a group of 4 of us. We're the only people who are ever going to be in this party. We're going to not invite any companions along for the ride, right? And we're just going to kind of play this like we are, like these characters or whatever. Which I think would be like fun and interesting, and I think it would be cool because you could do stuff like I want to go to this place where I know there's a really crazy sword for my build, or something like that, right? I think that would be like that would be a lot of fun and interesting. I will say something that's fun. We did all of Baldur's Gate in 2 long rests. We long rested
all of the city.
one time. Yeah, all of the time. We long rested one time. We kind of entered the city after a long rest, and then we did a bunch of stuff, and then we did one long rest in the middle, and then we did a bunch of other stuff, and that was it. That was how we did the that was how we did the game. I want to play a version of it where there are no long rests. Actually, I want to do all of Baldur's Gate in one day, no long rests, because I did sort of find a cheeky exploit in order to get there, and I think it would just sort of be like a funny, almost like speed run challenge thing to do. But I'm not gonna.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna do too much about it.
It's funny because so apparently that spell preparation thing, apparently like the intention is you can prepare spells as long as you're not in combat. Like you can switch up prepared spells, which feels incorrect to me. But like why would I ever have not prepared in combat?
Yep. Listen, you got it because of door tech. Obviously, you're gonna close the door in combat, and then, or I guess
The arcane lock would be the one
that arcane lock would be the one. Yeah, I'm thinking of. Yeah, for sure. Okay, very cool. What else happened? I played Starfield. We played some of this D&D game, which was honestly very funny. Rachel, I'm playing Mateo Vasquez, and Rachel was just sort of like, introduce yourselves. What are you doing? And I decided to do a bunch of bullshit. I was like, okay, Mateo walks into the city in handcuffs. He's in shackles. There's a big long chain because his smuggling ship has been arrested by the port authority, right? And we did, I had palmed my thieves tools, and I picked the lock, and then I locked one of the guards or I attempted to lock one of the guards to the chain, or whatever. It's just like a bunch of stuff. In the middle of combat, I pickpocketed him to steal his keys, and then I threw it to other people in the chain so they could start like unlocking themselves. It's just like a bunch of that sort of stuff that's fun. I just like I think part of what attracts me to D&D is these cockamamie schemes. It's like the thing I was explaining before about how I was playing a warlock and I had 2 eldritch blasts or I had 2 bolts per eldritch blast, and I had one pull a guy and then the other push him to make this like slingshot effect happen. It's just like dumb shit. I just want to do that, right? I want every round of combat, every time somebody calls on me, to like be some cute, funny thing to like trick people or whatever.
Nonsense. Yeah.
So hijink. We were calling them. And the funny thing is that my hijinks, the people who are who are involved in my hijinks, is Warren is playing a barbarian called Geth, and Geth is the straight man to Mateo's hijinks, right? Where Mateo is like doing all of this like crazy dumb bullshit, and Geth is there to kind of like pull his pull his feet from the fire kind of thing, which I think is a very fun dynamic.
Like Wooster and Jeeves type thing.
Yes, yeah, very similar to yeah.
No, I get that. So, the thing that is happening in the one D&D game, or the one Pathfinder game that I'm playing, is like I think I've talked about this before. My character is a cleric of Abadar, lawful neutral, and like we went and fought a magma dragon, and like the dragon says to us, "Why are you here?" And my character says, "You're under arrest for," like basically his whole thing is like, you violated the law, you're under arrest, come willingly or face the consequences, right? And so every time I say you're under arrest to like anything, it gets like this big fucking laugh line from the rest of the party. Just 'cause, like,
stop right there, criminal scum.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
I will say, so funnily, speaking of stop right there, criminal scum, I've been playing a bunch of Starfield, where Mateo Vasquez is also existing as a space smuggler, and I am now doing this thing where in Starfield you have to complete challenges in order to level up skills, and I want to get better. I want to become a better pilot. I want to pilot better ships. And so I have been flying, but I've joined the Crimson Fleet, the space pirates. So my new thing has been flying around trying to find ships, and then I will just blow up the Crimson Fleet starships that I encounter. And then I'll blow up the Crimson Fleet starships, and then I'll go to the Crimson Fleet, and they'll be like, "Hey guys, what the fuck?" And then I just pay them off. I just pay them money for like the bounty or whatever. I have also paid the bounty a couple of times to United Colonies because I don't have 100% chance of sneaking contraband into things, and so if they scan me correctly, I just warp jump away. And then I will come back and I'll have a big bounty. It'll be like 1,500 credits or something or whatever, but I will have sold my contraband at the time, and it's like, you know what, I'm willing to pay a $1,500 credit tax in order to continue. So it's been pretty funny, honestly. Real
quick, are you familiar with Trailer Park Boys?
Sort of, not super.
There is there's this famous meme image. It's one of the characters, and he's talking to like the guy, the police officer in the trailer park. He's like, "I'm going to pay you $100 to fuck off." And it's what I'm imagining. You're
That's kind of what it is.
doing,
So
yeah.
because you get these, so you get bounties, and you can make. I have an outpost, right? I've made my like little base. The outpost stuff I think is kind of whatever. Having an okay time with it or whatever. But you can build a self-service bounty board where you can just walk up to a computer and pay your bounties, right? To be fair, it doesn't always work correctly. And I did in fact once. I ran up a big bounty, and I went to the bounty board, and they're like, you can't buy your way out of this. And so I was just like, you know what, it's fine. And so I flew up into space in my ship, and I let them take me to jail, and I paid off my bounty that way. But you know, it you know, I don't know, it is what it is. It's the stories of Space Smuggler Mateo have been more fun now that it's finally clicked for me. It took me maybe like 10 hours to get into you know, I don't know, to get into the Starfield experience. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. Is there
Maybe
anything
that's
else?
it.
Is there anything else you want to talk about before we?
No, I guess not.
Well, I mean, I guess this usually comes at the end of the end stuff, but I'm going to scoop you. I'm going to say Australia comes out on the 21st. Go buy it and play it. Obviously, I mean, you should. You know, Buddy works for them. I guess I tested the game in like a slightly greater than normal capacity. It's a great game. I enjoy it, but you know, take that with the appropriate grain of salt. What else? If you'd like to send us emails about what we talked about in this podcast, you can email us at derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. If you want to tell us, you could email us about any things we talked about. You can email us about the truth behind the JFK assassination if you happen to know that. Rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you find good podcasts. Orion in the chat says, Mango, world's best Australia player. I don't think I'm better than Buddy. Buddy probably has more hours on it than me. I actually checked. I have like 20 some odd hours on it. Which, you know, for a game that's not released yet, that feels pretty good.
Yeah, I have 285 hours
Wow.
on it. And that doesn't include any of the pre-release like versions that I was not playing on, you know, like on Steam. Yeah, so we got a couple of folks who had, don't take it from me, you can take it from Retrobation, who said it's a god tier new roguelike, and then Wanderbots also said he was his most anticipated roguelike of 2023. He made a video.
In slightly more mainstream stuff. Didn't PC Gamer just drop a review? I think I saw that on
Yeah,
Twitter.
PC Gamer's
Or on
review was
X.
also insanely good. Where the fuck was it? The PC Gamer review was God, where the fuck was it? There's such a good quote in here. I don't know if there's been a true breakout deck builder since Monster Train, but I wonder if this could be the one. That was the thing that they said that I was really happy about.
It's an excellent game. Yeah. I highly recommend it to everybody at home. Rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you find podcasts. All the links are in the description. Besides Australia, you have anything you want to promote, Buddy?
No, I have nothing else I'm looking to promote.
Well, in that case, I'm going to say until next time to your listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.